It's just a bunch of knotted legal problems. Hypocrites. Yeah, that's the word for today's video. Hi, and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. My name is Nick, and today we are talking XRP and XRP news specifically. A few different things have happened in the news most recently for XRP, Ripple, SEC, all that kind of wonderful stuff. And I thought it would be a good opportunity here to talk through what I think is going on, what I think this is going to lead to in the slightly longer term for XRP's price action and all that wonderful stuff. As I get into today's video, if you do find it useful and informative, smash that like button. I really do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all the notifications, and in doing so, you will be kept up to date with everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. Right, let's jump right down into it. As I said earlier, right, knotted legal problems, which is incredibly interesting. So the SEC highlighted contradictory conclusions from similar cases and other pending decisions as some of the continuous legal issues. And so essentially what's going on here is that the SEC argue that knotted legal problems surrounding the court's application of the law, specifically the Howey test. And this is really coming down to Judge Torres's decision to basically say that sales of XRP on the secondary markets are not that of security sales. And it's an important kind of point because this does have implications to other cases that the SEC are running, and of course a lot of implications for the crypto space as a whole. And it's because of this, in fact, this kind of terminology or this kind of thought process that even Ripple are kind of, adhering to, is why they are calling it knotted legal problems. But in such a turn of phrase, it actually leads us down another set of rabbit holes, and specifically with the fair notice, because if they are knotty legal problems, as in you don't really know if it should or shouldn't be, if it's unclear in any way, shape or form, how can there be fair notice? Okay, and the idea here is that everybody who is operating a crypto company in the US, for example, under the assumption that the current laws are, fixed in place, and there's no kind of, how do I articulate it, issues with that, and there's no grey areas, right? And what so the SEC have basically gone around and done by saying knotted legal problems is essentially saying that there is in fact grey area. It's not as black and white as they want you to perceive it to be, right? So in one argument, they're saying the law is the law, it's black and white, you should have known categorically that XRP was a sale, of scales were a security sale, right? And then on the flip side of that, because there's something hasn't swung in their particular direction, what do they go and say? Well, it's a bit grey, it's a bit, knotted, it's not overly clear, and that's contradictory to what they were saying before. So hypocrites, again, is that word that I used earlier. It kind of fits quite nicely here, because the SEC are being very hypocritical. They kind of want their cake and they want to eat it at the same time. They do not want to kind of lose. They are basically doing anything they can to try to kind of claw some kind of victory back. Now, this brings us on to several other points when essentially it comes into the news. I mean, actually, if we go back into that 1 second before I move on from this point, because we do have the CLO of Ripple basically saying the latest filing is hypocritical pivot, and so you got 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗘. I even say his name, it's really bad, I apologize. This is basically the Chief Legal Officer over at Ripple, General Counsel, in the SEC versus Ripple case, right? And he's basically characterized the United States Securities Exchange Commission's latest submission as a contradictory shift, and basically it holds very little sway, and I think that's very important. It's a hypocritical pivot is what he is saying, and I totally agree. Another SEC filing, another hypocritical pivot after years of its chairman saying the rules are clear and must be obeyed. Now they're basically saying that the SEC now cries that the appeal is urgently needed to resolve the knotted legal problems. And again, it basically just makes a mockery of everything that's so far that's happened within the case. Now, we can go a little bit deeper because there are some other things happening over in the US that I think are also very important when it comes to not just the Ripple or the SEC versus Ripple and the XRP price action as a result of that, I think there's also some pretty big things happening for the entire crypto space over in the US. And so we see 𝗕𝗪𝗪 basically sponsors the amendment to limit SEC's crypto oversight. And so I don't think there's like a line where we can say hierarchy sits there that, you know, SEC are 100% the oversight for crypto, not when we have the CFTC also kind of providing some kind of regulatory frameworks when it comes to currencies and stuff like that. There's definitely some grey area in between the two entities over in the US, but this particular amendment could be very, very critical for the entire crypto space in the US. And so basically 𝗕𝗪𝗪 intends to introduce an appointment of amendments that will limit the SEC's utilization of funds for digital asset enforcement until comprehensive rules and regulations are implemented. So the idea here is that the current laws, the current frameworks that are out there do not apply to digital assets, and they are not fit for purpose, right? The Howey test was derived many years before digital assets even existed, and so forth. Maybe there needs to be a new set of regulations or frameworks that are created for that. Now, 𝗕𝗪𝗪 criticizes SEC Chair Gary Gensler quite aggressively, basically alleging he has overstepped his authority, which has negatively affected American people. 𝗕𝗪𝗪 urges Congress to utilize its available methods and proper procedures to basically thwart any potential misuse of taxpayer funds by Gensler and the SEC. So to kind of go onto the X platform, Tom has basically gone on there and said, at Gary Gensler has abused his authority to grow the administrative state to the detriment of American people. Congress must use all their tools, including the appropriations process, to restrict Chair Gensler from further weaponizing taxpayer dollars. And I think there's some interesting kind of terminology thrown in there, specifically when it comes to weaponizing the SEC, okay, to attack cryptocurrency firms and projects, as this might be exchanges all the way through to the actual protocol layers. And essentially what we are seeing here is this continuation of aggressive action from the SEC with enforcement rather than regulatory frameworks. Essentially it is guilty by association almost. If you are a cryptocurrency firm and maybe you're dealing with other kind of digital assets, you are guilty of crimes that you may not even be aware that you are committing, simply because the frameworks are knotted legal problems. Okay, so I want to stress that everything that the SEC are demonstrating to us right now is why we need to see more reform over in the US and why we need to see these frameworks actually implemented. And I was talking yesterday about how the CFTC want to essentially create a sandbox for digital assets, test whether or not they actually fit and work with the current structures and regulatory processes that are currently in existence over in the US, and whether or not the SEC have to be involved in that sandbox as well. I think that the SEC simply under the current leadership cannot and will not basically help harbour the future of crypto in the US, and Gary Gensler will need to be removed from office sooner rather than later. I do think it is just a matter of time, and the ETFs are another clear example of this, with constant delays and potentially rejecting them or denying them, having to then go through the courts to get those overturned, is something that I think Gary Gensler is more than happy to willing to let happen. I think in the long term though, we are going to see Gary Gensler get outed, he'll be fired, and personally I'd like to see him face some jail time. I don't think that is going to happen, but I think that is something that I would very much like to see. I think there needs to be higher accountability course of action here. I think essentially we need to see these government officials, these officers who are supposed to be acting on behalf of the American people, actually have more severe consequences when there is a misuse or corruption at these levels. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. I think I'm going to wrap this video up there, just a nice brief one, just keeping it up to date on what is going on with the SEC, what is going on with Ripple, and of course the legal actions over in the US. If you found it useful, smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe. If you haven't yet joined us in Discord, what are you waiting for? Check it out, linked in the description below. Until the next one, have a fantastic day.